Hey guys, Will here. So if you're a PC enthusiast, Cooler Master is a brand that is more than likely already familiar to you, but they've just entered the sim racing space with their very first cockpit. Now this might look like a traditional tube frame style sim racing cockpit, but this one has a really unique feature. Now over the years, we've tested a bunch of cockpits that claim to be adjustable between a Formula style and GT style seating position. In reality, and I'm sure any of you who have owned one of these cockpits would agree with me, they're so clumsy and cumbersome to actually adjust between those seating positions that it ends up just being too much of a hassle. You end up just sort of leaving it in one sort of hybrid seating position and never really adjusting it again. But this one has the ability to adjust between a fully reclined Formula style seating position like what you see here, all the way up to a truck driving seating position or anything in between in under about 2 minutes. So pretty unique feature here. Easily the most user-friendly setup that we've seen like this to date, but also comes with a very hefty price tag. So is it worth the asking price? Is it really that much better than other styles of cockpits? Yeah, there's a lot of questions to answer in today's video. So let's dive in and check out the Cooler Master DYN X. So just quickly before we get started today, as always, a bit of important housekeeping information just so you have the full context of exactly what we're doing today. So firstly, big thank you to Cooler Master for sending across the cockpit for us to check out. Now you might have noticed they also have their own motion system integrated to this as well. Now this is a rebranded version of the Cinque Integrale DK2 Plus motion system that we have reviewed here on the channel previously. So for more details on that, you can check out that review. Now they have asked us to return the motion system on this particular rig, but they have allowed us to hold on to the cockpit for future comparisons as well as the seat. So big thanks to Cooler Master for supplying the cockpit for us to check out for today's review. Now we will be cross comparing this against a few other cockpits in today's video, so it's important that you guys are aware that all of the cockpits that we'll be talking about have also been provided to us for review purposes. Now if you do decide you want to pick up one of these or any other sim racing gear for that matter, head over to boostedmedia.net or check out the links down in the description below. There you will find a bunch of discount codes and affiliate links, which are an awesome way of supporting our channel at no additional cost to you and even helping you save some money in some cases as well with some discount codes. So check those out for more information. But yeah, as is always the case here at Boosted Media, no third party has any sort of input into anything that we're saying today. Purely my own observations and opinions, having used this product for a number of weeks now. So let's dive in. So let's start off here by looking at pricing. So in US dollars directly from Cooler Master, you're looking at $1,999.99 in Northern America. That is including free shipping. Now they do have a relatively well-established distribution network around the world, so you will just want to shop around, make sure you're getting the best price. One of our affiliate partners, Apivi, has this available for US dollars $1,499. What you do need to factor in there is that that doesn't include free shipping like it does from Cooler Master. Now shipping is going to end up being around that kind of $500 US mark anyway, so again, just shop around, make sure you're getting the best possible deal there. Check out discount codes on boostedmedia.net as well. That may help save you a little bit of money as well. So that is just for the cockpit. The seat then on top of that, most cockpits sell the seat separately. You're looking at $799.99 US for the seat. And again, from Cooler Master, that does include shipping. Anything over $100 is free shipping from Cooler Master in Northern America, at least. Our PV's pricing there is $800.99, but you will have to factor in the cost of shipping on top of that. Now, in terms of wheel decks, there's a couple of different options there. It comes with a universal wheel deck, which unfortunately they didn't send us, so we can't really demonstrate that. But the optional front or side mounts, like what we have here, this is the front mount, are going to set you back $89.99 US dollars, and you will end up having to pay shipping on top of that unless you order them at the same time as the cockpit. So think about what you're going to want to mount. And then if you want to mount a motion system on this guy, the brackets to bolt onto here. Now, look, to be honest with you guys, of course, I'll give you a detailed look at these later on, but you probably could fabricate something yourself for a lot less than this. You're looking at $399.99 US just for the actuator mounts. Now, if you do buy the Cooler Master / Sigma Integrale motion system, it does, of course, come included with all the brackets. You're going to need to bolt it directly onto the rig. Now, that hasn't quite been released in the US at the time of making this video, but looking at their European pricing, you're looking at, what was it, 9,300 euro for that motion system. So very expensive motion system as well. So all in here, as you see with the seat, the motion system and the cockpit, without pedals or a wheelbase, you're already looking at around about the 13,000 US dollar mark. And they do sell bundles as well with various different sim racing components, including the SimCube to Pro. So make sure you have a look at those options as well. That might be a good way of saving yourself a little bit of cash instead of forking out separately for some of those peripherals. So shop around there too. So yeah, certainly a very expensive cockpit, particularly when you compare it to the price of a high-end aluminium profile cockpit. You know, you're still only looking at around sort of half the price of what you're looking at for something like this at the very most. So what exactly are you getting for the money here? Why would you even be interested in spending this kind of money on a cockpit over some of the other options? So we'll circle back in a moment and talk about the unboxing and assembly process. But to start this out, I wanted to highlight the fact that at first, when we got this thing all together, we got all our gear on it, we started to adjust it into the right seating position. We were having all kinds of issues and we really weren't a big fan of it. We found that, you know, there were a lot of compromises that we were having to make to kind of make things work. And then when you tried to adjust it, it wouldn't work properly anymore. And the whole ease of adjustability, which was supposed to be one of the big selling points of the cockpit, just sort of didn't seem to be turning out to be the case in reality. And I think we were guilty of kind of judging this by some of the experiences that we've had with some other cockpits in the past that didn't sort of work out the way they'd been advertised to. So what we ended up doing was actually adjusting the cockpit to a neutral seating position. So somewhere around the middle here in a sort of a GT style seating position, like something you'd have for a GT3 car, for example. And then what we did was we adjusted all of our peripherals, so our pedals, our wheel deck, our seat and everything, so that it was all set up correctly for GT. And then when we came back and we started adjusting between truck and formula style seating positions and everything else in between, everything just kind of fell into place and we were kind of left scratching our heads wondering, you know, what had gone wrong. And really what it was that we were we'd started off in a upright seating position like a truck, and we were trying to set it up as if it were a GT style cockpit. So get everything in the right position for GT style driving, although the cockpit was actually in the truck driving position. And, you know, that might seem completely stupid, but, you know, it's just the way our brains kind of processed it all, given the experiences that we'd had with other cockpits in the past. So once we kind of reset our brains and set it up that way, yeah, as I was saying, everything just kind of fell into place and it all actually ended up working really well. But that said, there are still quite a few compromises and things that you do need to be aware of here. But yeah, it actually does work really well, as you would expect for the price, of course, once you have things set up correctly. But let's rewind a little bit now and first of all talk about the whole delivery and assembly process. So if you've ever built an aluminium profile cockpit or watched a video of one being built, you'd know they often come in either one big box or multiple smaller boxes that you have to unbox. Sometimes you're going to be dealing with things like metal shavings, sharp edges. You end up with a million bolts and T-nuts and things that you have to assemble together. And look, for somebody that's never done anything like that before, you're probably going to want to allocate at least 1, maybe 2 days to just assembling the cockpit and then bolting all your peripherals on top of that. And the thing that usually ends up taking the most time with a setup like that is actually getting everything in the right seating position, getting all your peripherals relative to your seating position correct as well, making sure that everything is symmetrical and lined up correctly, there's no twisting. Often you'll think that you've breezed through it, then you'll go set up your monitor and find that your monitor doesn't sit right and everything's skew-if. And then you go back and measure things and realize that you've got something down here that's adjusted wrong, that you then have to pull half the rig apart to go and adjust. And yeah, it can be a bit of a nightmare for those who haven't done it before. I actually have a video here on the channel, I'll link it down in the description below for you, on some of my tips and tricks for having a better experience building an aluminium profile cockpit. But yeah, anybody who's built one before would know that it can be quite tricky. Now, by contrast, this thing was an absolute breeze to put together. It did arrive on a pallet, so if you're looking at installing something like this in a apartment building or a high-rise or something like that, you will want to consider the weight and the largeness of the boxes, just getting them upstairs. You want to have a lift or something like that that you can use for sure. But yeah, you unbox the thing. It comes in 2 separate boxes for the cockpit, or 3 boxes if you're including a seat as well, and obviously additional accessories will be coming in separate boxes too, so the motion system is packed separately. But yeah, basically you can see a little join in the rig just here. So the base plate here and this portion of the rig where it swivels on this bearing system is all packaged as one, so you don't have to actually install the platform on top of the base or anything crazy like that. All you have to do is just slide the front on here. It's actually got a really clever mechanism. One of the weak points that we often see in a lot of cockpits is where they cut the frame in half and then have joins to bolt everything together to reduce the size and bulk for shipping, of course, reduce the costs around that. Often that ends up being a weak point where things bend and flex, and it's just not a good experience. This thing has got a really clever mechanism where you've got a sleeve that slides in on both sides, and then you've got some little grub screws which expand in the bottom. So once you've got everything slid together, you wind out those grub screws, it all expands and locks in place. And then you can see these brackets here. So there's a bracket on this side, a bracket on that side, and then you bolt the two sides together. So very straightforward. You will have to install the pedal tray yourself. That comes with some little brackets, as you can see here, and you can rotate the orientation of those brackets to raise or lower the pedal tray. There is enough adjustment available there. One of the big things that we were interested to test with this is, you know, how quick is it to adjust between those seating positions? Do you need to pull the whole pedal tray off and adjust the angle and, you know, pull the wheelbase off and adjust the angle of that every single time you switch between seating positions? Or can you literally just raise it and lower it and have it all just work? And very happy to report that, at least for me, as a 6-footer, it was absolutely fine. We didn't actually need to adjust any of those things once we had them adjusted correctly. So in terms of the pedal position and the wheel deck, unless you really want to go into an authentic truck style driving position, or you may find you want to tilt it up or down just slightly for the extreme formula style seating position, like what you see here, you may want to have this tilted down slightly towards you. Other than that, yeah, everything in between was absolutely fine, and it literally is a 2-minute, if not less, job just to undo the 4 bolts that I'll show you in a moment to adjust the angle. Simple as that. So yeah, in terms of assembly, like I said, about half a day should have you covered here. So really the only somewhat frustrating and cumbersome part of the build is literally just bolting the seat onto the rails and get everything adjusted there correctly. Now that is something that's usually tricky on any cockpit, so certainly not a complaint about this one in particular. You know, you'll find that you need to get the spacing correct, but you can't really do that when you've got the seat bolted to it because you can't get underneath to tighten the bolts. And, you know, you kind of have to guess a little bit there where you think things might need to be. And, you know, ultimately you'll probably end up pulling it apart a couple of times just to get it adjusted. But again, not a complaint about this cockpit. Just wanted to highlight that that was literally the only part that really kind of had us a little bit frustrated with this build. Otherwise, it was very, very straightforward. Now, as I mentioned before, there are a couple of different options in terms of the wheel deck. This is the front mount system that we have here. And when I looked at this, I was immediately thinking, oh boy, this thing's gonna have a ton of flex. But as it turned out, this is every bit as rigid as any other wheel deck that we've ever tested on any other rig. And that actually genuinely really surprised me because I did not expect that at all. I can't speak for the universal mount because we don't have that here to test, unfortunately. But yeah, this one is absolutely solid. Didn't notice any meaningful flex in any of these parts around here either. Obviously, I was paying a lot of attention to the join to make sure that there wasn't introducing any flex. And yeah, look, I mean, you can see a little bit of movement on camera here as I do a flex test, but certainly nothing meaningful overall, and certainly no more than we would find on a high-end aluminium profile rig when we're putting those kinds of forces in. And you know, what I'm doing here on camera is to demonstrate how much bend there is when you really get into it. But in reality, when you're driving with the thing, there's absolutely no perceivable flex whatsoever. So absolutely fine in regards to that too. That is something that we have found to be an issue on some of the other tube frame cockpits that we've tested in the past. So I was really happy to see that. Anytime you have a big U shape like this, that's obviously designed to make it easier to get in and out of the rig, you do obviously introduce the ability for this half to flex compared to the bottom half. But yeah, not an issue on this rig at all. Now, just in terms of compatibility as well, we'll put a compatibility chart up on the screen for you now for the pedal tray. It does have a whole bunch of holes drilled in it, as you can see here, and it is going to be compatible with the majority of mainstream pedals that you might be looking at if you're looking at spending this kind of money on a cockpit. So I think they've done a pretty good job there. You know, some rigs have slots cut out, which will allow you to mount pretty much anything, or the ability to sort of move the front relative to the back. So it's not quite as universal as some of those other options, but you do have the ability to slide the tray forward and back or raise it and lower it on either side to adjust the angle, as we talked about before. Similarly with the wheel deck as well, again, we can't talk about the universal mount because we don't have it here, but the front mount was compatible with the majority of wheelbases that support a front mount. The only exception to that I could find in our inventory here was just the SimuCube 2 Ultimate, which recently was actually discontinued by SimuCube, but that has a slightly wider spacing for the mount, so that won't mount on this guy. You will have to use some sort of aftermarket adapter for that. But yeah, otherwise no issues at all with mounting. You can see there's a ton of angle adjustment here as well. So you got 3 mounting holes along the sides here and then 3 slots. That's going to allow you to get it pretty much anywhere from completely upright to tilted down as far as you want. You can invert that, you know, flip it around to give you even more adjustment as well. One thing that is a glaringly obvious omission is that there is no shifter mount at this point in time. Apparently they are working on one. I don't have any further information on that at this point. Look, some other companies like Track Racer, for example, do sell all sorts of bolt-on accessories for their tube frame cockpits. I'm not actually sure what the diameter of their tube is because we haven't tested one of those to date, although I will hopefully be able to test one pretty soon. So I can't guarantee you that they will bolt straight on. Do your own research there. But look, hopefully it won't be too long before Cooler Master have an option there for a shifter mount as well. Keyboard trays, mouse pads and things like that should hopefully not be too far off either. So yeah, look, in terms of overall versatility, considering that it is a tube frame cockpit, I think it's pretty good. You obviously don't have quite as much flexibility in terms of where you can bolt appendages onto the rig. So if you're wanting to mount something like a button box and so forth, you can see there are some holes here on the wheel deck, but obviously you don't have channels along the steel heel like you would on an aluminium profile cockpit, for example, that allow you to just bolt appendages on. So just be mindful of that if that's something that's going to be important to you. Think about what you might likely be wanting to do with your sim rig into the future rather than, you know, just worrying about the accessories that you might be buying now, particularly if you're investing this kind of money in a cockpit. You know, chances are you're going to want to expand upon it into the future. So you may be somewhat limited by a setup like this compared to an aluminium profile. But then on the flip side to that, you do have the advantage of this looking a little bit cleaner and tidier in a living room environment or something like that. One thing that would make it cleaner and tidier is some sort of included cable management. With a tube frame like this, you do of course have the opportunity to pass cables directly through the tubes and then have them come out the bottom. Big thick tubes like this, you could even pass power cables through if they had provision for it. Now obviously that would mean the need to have cutouts in the metal, which may compromise rigidity to an extent. But yeah, there was absolutely no included cable management whatsoever. And you can see we've just kind of got the cables dangling down on the left-hand side there. You could put more effort into that. You could cable tie it around the tubes and run it down that way. But you know, you do have to obviously account for the fact that it is going to be moving around quite a bit as you raise and lower the cockpit. So you will have to have a little bit of slack in there to account for that. So yeah, for the price, I would have expected to see some sort of cable management included. Even just some little custom clips or Velcro straps or something are things that we see included on cockpits that cost a fraction of what this does. So really no excuse for that, I don't think. The other thing that did jump out at me as well is, you know, for this kind of money, I was expecting, you know, mountain bike frame quality welds. And you can see here that is certainly not the case. They don't appear to be of poor quality overall in terms of strength or rigidity or anything like that, but they're just not really clean, tidy welds, which for me, if I was spending this kind of money, I would be disappointed with, so I have to call it out. But look, otherwise, I think it is very well presented and very clean and tidy looking overall. The only other fundamental issue that I had here was I really don't like what they've done with the design of where you mount the control box for the Sigma Integrale motion system. It bolts just directly onto the base tray here, which means basically every time you get in and out of the rig, you have to be mindful of not stepping on it because it's not designed to take any sort of weight. And I already squished the lid of that a little bit and had to pop it back out again because I made that mistake. You know, if you have a look at my DYN X cockpit, for example, that's got the D-box system on it, and there's a tray that goes across the top and it literally bolts to the underside of that. Now, you could theoretically invert the mounting on this and bolt it in from the underside, but that control box does have an active cooling system, so you don't want to have it too close to the ground where it's going to pick up dirt and debris, particularly if it's on carpet or something like that. So what I would like to see is some sort of a frame or box around that, just so that when you're getting in and out of the rig, it's not going to be such a problem. Something like this, I think, is going to be maybe more suited to an industrial setting, something like a, you know, a sim racing center or something like that. And that for me, if I was running some sort of a sim racing center, would be an absolute deal breaker. I'd have to come up with some sort of a solution to mitigate that issue. So yeah, not sure exactly what they were thinking with that, but definitely an oversight in my opinion at least. So look, that is a basic run through of the basic assembly and how everything goes together. So let's have a more detailed look now at how the pivoting mechanism actually works. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, we've got a bearing here with a shaft that runs right through the middle, and the whole cockpit pivots on that. So you can see as we go forward and back, it's all pivoting around that. Now, one of the things that really impressed me about this is how well balanced it is. Now, obviously that will depend on the hardware that you've got mounted to it, but between the hydraulic dampers that you see here and the overall balance of the system, it is very, very easy to work on by yourself. Now, they do recommend in their instructions that you have a second person help you, but look, some other cockpits that we've tested that are adjustable, I would almost go as far as to say are quite dangerous. You end up having to have your hands in quite vulnerable positions with sharp edges, and it is very easy to crush a finger or cut yourself or something like that. On this guy, everything is very smooth. And if I try to force this guy up, not so much on the downstroke, but if I try to force it up, you can actually hear those hydraulic dampers kick in, and it won't actually allow me to go any faster than that. So it means that if you've got a lot of weight at the front and you release those bolts, it's not going to just suddenly go flying forward and smash into your monitor or anything like that. And we will come back and talk about monitor integration a little bit later on in today's video, because that is going to be one really important consideration and something that actually surprised me at how well it actually ended up working. So, but yeah, coming back to the mechanism here, these are the hydraulic dampers. So exactly the same kind of thing that you would find on the boot of your car, for example. I don't think that they're pneumatic. I think they are hydraulic. It definitely sounds like fluid going through there, but either way, it doesn't really matter. They do the job. So that is absolutely fine. And then you can see on the back here, we've got an array of holes, and we'll put up an overlay on the screen for you now so you can see exactly the different ideas here for seating positions. But if we go in the top position here, that is simulating a trucking style setup. So, you know, things like Euro Truck Simulator or American Truck Simulator, for example. As we move down, we go through, you know, stadium trucks, rally style driving, street cars, GT3, GT4, and then we get down into our prototypes, so LMP1, LMP2, for example, and then we get down into our formula style seating position. Now, the thing that really surprised me, honestly shocked me with this, is that it all kind of just works. Now, you would expect that, you know, as you go down into a formula position, you're wanting to raise your legs up and potentially move the steering wheel as well. But because of the position that this is actually pivoting, and the relative position between the pedals, the wheel, and the seat of your pants as you're sitting in the seat, everything just kind of falls into, almost like magic, to be honest with you. I just didn't expect it to work as well as it does. And like I said at the start of the video, when we first set this up and sort of tried to set it up like a GT car, even though it was raised all the way up, the opposite, you know, exactly the opposite was the case. We couldn't get the seat far enough back. The steering wheel was too close to us, and it was just an absolute mess. And we very nearly kind of judged it based on that experience, you know, before we realized the, you know, the fundamental error that we were making in our setup. But yeah, once we got everything adjusted correctly, honestly, it just worked. I mean, you guys can see in the overlays here, you know, just how comfortable and how well set up the seating position is in every position. Now, we talked before about the ability to adjust the wheel deck position and the pedal tray position. But look, as you can see here again, it just didn't end up being necessary, at least for me, which is, to me, amazing, because it literally means for the very first time out of the cockpits that we've tested at least, you can genuinely go between a formula style seating position and a truck sim position. It's gonna take you 2 minutes to undo the 4 bolts. You can see there's 2 bolt holes on either side in the back of this part, so it literally just goes through those. So yeah, you literally just bolt them in, change your steering wheel, and you're pretty much good to go. I mean, you can, as I said before, fine tune it a little bit further if you really want to get into the semantics of things. But, you know, as you can see here, we set it up as a truck sim directly out of a formula style setup. And yeah, the seating position was perfectly comfortable and absolutely fine for doing that kind of thing. So they've done a really good job there. The only one thing that I would say is if you are tall, and I'm 6 foot, as I mentioned before, to get into the extreme formula style position down here, you will notice in the position that we've got this at the moment, the seat does get very close to the back here. If you want to have the seat in the furthest back position on these side rails, you will find that it will foul and make contact here before you get into those bottom positions. So LMP was not an issue, but going down into formula style, we did end up running into a problem there. So we did have to make one small compromise in moving the seats slightly more forward for formula style seating position. And that meant that I was, you know, with my physique, a little bit too close to the steering wheel in those other positions. But look, to be honest with you guys, I find that the formula style seating position is maybe a little bit too reclined anyway. So what I would recommend is get your seat and everything set up correctly for you in the middle, it's sort of middle ground, so GT style, like what we were talking about before, and then, you know, just get it down as low as you can for formula style. I found it was absolutely fine in the LMP. It still gave me that kind of reclined, you know, genuine feeling, and yeah, it just worked really, really, really well. So yeah, just a couple of little compromises there to be mindful of, but nowhere near the level of compromise that we've run into with other similar kinds of concepts to this in the past. So yeah, I've got to say they've done a really, the engineering in this to make it work as well as it does. You know, I think the reason we probably judged it initially is because it just seemed like it was too good to be true. So we're looking for something to be wrong. And then the more time we spent with this thing, you know, we've been driving with it for a couple of weeks now, the more we've come to love it, the more we've realized that it just works. And I think that that's pretty impressive, particularly when you consider that this is, this is the first cockpit that they've made. They obviously either have a really intelligent engineer working there, or they've just gone through a lot of revisions to get it as compromise-free as it's ended up being. So again, you would expect all of that for the price. I'm certainly not trying to compare it to some of those other cheaper rigs in terms of value for money, because obviously you are getting what you pay for there. But yeah, if money's no object, it certainly does a very, very good job there. So just a couple more quick things to cover off in terms of adjustment before we move into the driving experience. So you do have, in addition to the angle adjustment that we talked about before with those brackets that can be oriented in different directions, you've got some rails along the side here that almost look like seat rails on their side. And when you mount the pedal tray, you've got some T-nuts that slide into those channels, and you can loosen those off, slide the pedal tray forward and back. So that's going to allow you to relatively easily slide the tray forward and back. It is a little bit awkward to get up underneath there. It's not something that you're going to be wanting to do every time you change cars or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons we were talking about, whether or not it was going to be necessary to adjust everything else when you adjust the seating position. And as I said, for us, it wasn't, but your experience may be different there. But if you are changing between drivers, somebody that's a lot shorter than you, then you would obviously need to be able to bring that forward. So you do have the ability for some adjustment there. Similarly, on the wheel deck as well, you've got exactly the same style of rails here. So you can just loosen those off, and we already talked about the angle adjustment, but you can slide the entire assembly forward and back. Obviously, you do just need to be mindful of the cables coming out of the back of your base and those potentially bumping into the cross member at the back here. So obviously that is going to just vary depending on the hardware that you're planning on mounting. But yeah, absolutely no issues there for me, at least in terms of adjustment. And again, I just want to reiterate the fact that we didn't actually find we had to adjust the pedals or the wheel deck at all for any of those seating positions that we experimented with from truck all the way through to Formula One, which really did surprise me. So let's move on now. Let's talk more about what the thing is like to drive with overall. We'll talk about the motion just briefly as well, and then wrap things up with our conclusions. Okay, so just a quick word on the motion system. As I mentioned earlier, this is a Sigma Integrale DK2 Plus system, which is rebranded by Cooler Master. Obviously, they've got some sort of a deal there with Sigma Integrale. Now, we have reviewed this in detail on its own in the past as a Sigma Integrale system, so I'll link that review down in the description below for you for all the details. But what I was interested in for this review is the integration into this chassis. I was looking for any sort of weird vibration or twist or anything like that. Happy to report that there was absolutely no issues. Comparing the exact same system on a high-end aluminium profile cockpit across to this, there was absolutely no loss in fidelity or anything like that. No weird rattles, nothing really to speak of whatsoever. But yeah, look, this motion system is right up there with the best of the best. Obviously, you're paying a lot of money for that privilege. But yeah, for more details on that, check out our full review. Just do want to reiterate again, for those who might have skipped through the video, the mounting solution for the control box, I think, needs to be revised, because you don't want to be stepping on that control box, because it's not designed to take any load. And where it's positioned, every time somebody gets in and out of the rig, unless you specifically tell them not to, and even then, you're probably going to find they're going to step on it and damage it, particularly if you're in a sim racing center kind of environment. So yeah, definitely needs some revision there, or something fabricated to protect that control box. Now, another really important consideration with a cockpit of this style that has a big bar that goes out from behind the wheelbase is going to be your monitors and positioning of those. Now, obviously for VR, that's not really a problem, but if you're wanting to run a triple screen setup or a large single screen or something like that, obviously there are going to be some compromises there. So what we ended up doing, in lieu of a Cooler Master branded monitor stand, which is coming in the future, but again, unfortunately we don't have it, so we can't talk about it this time. We got one of our monitor stands from another cockpit of a similar style to this, and we basically, again, just set this thing up in a GT style seating position. So in the middle, we got the monitor into the position that we wanted it, and then we added about an extra 2 or 3 inches on top of that, just to account for the movement in the chassis due to the motion platform. Now, obviously, if you don't have a motion platform, that isn't really a problem, but we wanted to make absolutely sure that we weren't going to smack into the back of our monitor once we did that. So we ended up with the bottom of the monitor just slightly below the top of our SimiCube 2 Pro wheelbase. And in the GT style seating position, that was absolutely fine. Ideally, I would have liked to have been able to drop it a little bit lower, but again, because of this compromise of this steel bar across the top here, obviously you can't drop the monitor down as low as you may otherwise be able to do. So that is one important compromise just to be mindful of. But what I was expecting when I did that is that as you tilt through the different seating positions, obviously the position of this is going to be moving relative to your monitor because it's not fixed to the actual rig. So in the truck position, our ideal monitor position for GT was only just clearing the motion platform. Tom didn't trust me that it was actually going to fit, but I was like, nah, it's going to be okay. And it ended up being within about 5 millimeters of smacking into the bottom of our expensive ultra wides that we reviewed a couple of months ago. So that was a little bit sketchy, but it did work. But as you move through the different seating positions, obviously your eye position is moving quite significantly relative to the monitor position. And I was honestly expecting that to be a pretty severe compromise. As it turned out, once again, for a single monitor ultra wide style setup, which is using quite a narrow monitor, it wasn't really an issue. The lower you go down, because of the wheel position and everything, we did find we had to slightly adjust the horizon and the viewing angle inside the sim to account for the offset. But other than that, it just kind of worked. Now, obviously, if you were, or maybe not obviously, if you were using a triple monitor setup where the monitors are wrapping around you, as the seat goes down, you're going to be dropping relative to those side screens. And I think that's probably where it's going to have a lot more of an impact. But for a single monitor setup, it actually worked really well to, again, the extent that I didn't really feel the need to go and adjust that monitor position. Again, I could go from truck driving all the way down to formula style seating position like what we have this now. And the monitor was still absolutely fine. It wasn't absolutely perfect placement, but it was certainly usable and worth the compromise to get into the authentic seating position for the type of car that you're driving. So to reiterate again, guys, this is the first cockpit that I've tested where you could genuinely actually change between seating positions and have a good and relatively authentic experience without having to pull things off the rig and just having it be such a cumbersome process that realistically it's not something that you're ever going to do in the real world. So look, it's definitely a big thumbs up from me in regards to that. There were no other issues that we ran into in terms of rigidity or anything like that. The only other issue that I did have was the neck cushion that they include for formula style seating positions. So this guy here, as you can see, it's a good number of inches thick and it's meant to stick on the back here. Now, as you can see in this driving footage now, this was just fundamentally broken. You can see it's pushing in the back of my neck and my neck was really crinked forward to the point where it was actually causing neck strain within a couple of minutes. And it just made me feel like I was sitting on top of the steering wheel and just not a good experience at all. So yeah, I don't know what the heck they were thinking with this thing. Well, I actually ended up swapping it out because I did feel the need to have some support there in the formula style seating position. In the more upright positions, you find that you're supporting your neck naturally anyway. You're not actually leaning against the back of the seat. So it wasn't a problem for me anywhere until I started to get down into those LMP and formula style seating positions. But I just grabbed a little neck cushion from one of my Next Level Racing office chairs actually. And this literally just goes around the outside like that, sits in the middle there, and you can see it's just kind of levitating. But when I sit in the rig, that was just providing the slight little bit of cushioning behind my neck that I needed to be comfortable in between races and things like that. So I could just lean up against that, have my neck be supported, and then when I was driving, I'd lean forward again. So yeah, I don't know exactly what they were thinking with the with this chunky neck cushion, but that was certainly not a great experience at all. So I'd say that and the placement of the control box for the motion are the two things that I would recommend revising for a V2. Otherwise, the chair is actually really comfortable. It has a pass-through for a 5-point harness if you want to run one of those. Plenty of girth in there as well. But yeah, comfortable chair overall. We did just notice a little bit of a rattle underneath here, as you can hear, where the wire for tensioning the sides is joined together. It just rattles against the bottom of the chair, but no issues with the back popping out or flexing or anything like that. That's something that we always specifically test for. Heavy braking, pushing into the back of the seat. So some seats that we've tested in the past sort of pop out or flex, and that can really cause havoc on muscle memory when you're braking. So something that we always look for there, but wasn't an issue with this at all. I think it is a pretty expensive seat, and there are plenty of other options out there that you should at least look at before just assuming that this is the one that you want to go for, given that it is an additional cost anyway. But yeah, look, otherwise, everywhere we looked, every type of driving we did, the driving experience overall was very good with minimal compromise. And yeah, with an ease of use level that actually made it conducive to using the feature rather than having it be something that seems like a really great idea in theory, but not so practical in actual execution. So overall, in conclusion, I think it's a really good cockpit, and particularly when you consider, it's a first effort from Cooler Master, I think they've done a really good job. The barrier for me, honestly, is just the price. I think this thing is way too expensive for what it is, even though it does provide the best experience that I've seen in terms of anything that has this level of adjustability for the seating position. So yeah, I mean, look, I just personally could not justify spending this kind of money on something like this when there are plenty of other good options out there, unless money just wasn't an issue for me, unless maybe I was setting up a sim racing center and, you know, the cost of somebody going and adjusting seating positions, having somebody employed to do that justified the extra cost of something like this instead of having an extra employee or something like that. But, you know, for a home environment where, you know, realistically, you're probably not going to be changing between driving positions all that often, you know, it's going to be up to you guys to decide whether you feel like it's worth the extra money. But all I can tell you is that there's plenty of other cockpits that we've tested that, you know, that adjustability aside, provide just as good a driving experience for less than half of the price than they're asking for this thing. And, you know, for this price, I would have expected higher quality welds, slightly higher quality overall presentation, I think. But look, in terms of the actual driving experience, it does provide a really good experience. So no complaints there. Look, at the end of the day, if it was half the price, I would have absolutely no issues recommending it at all. But yeah, with that price tag, there's a lot of other options that you need to consider before even considering spending this kind of money. Because as good as that mechanism is, and as good as the overall build quality is, welds aside, I just can't see where that price tag is in this thing. It just seems excessively expensive. And look, really guys, it's as simple as that. So yeah, good cockpit, good execution here, very minimal compromise, great driving experience, but yeah, an absolutely crazy price tag that I think is just unjustified for the product at the end of the day. That is my opinion of the Cooler Master DYN X. I hope the video has helped you out, guys. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on future videos. And if there's any other detail that you want to see on this, we probably will be doing some further testing over time. I'm keen to try and get my hands on some of their accessory mounts, maybe their integrated monitor mount as well, because I think that could actually be really cool, having the monitor tilt along with the cockpit as you go through. I think that's probably the one thing that's missing here. Although, as I said, the external monitor mount does work surprisingly well. Having an integrated monitor stand would definitely work a lot better. So keen to see exactly what they do there. But otherwise, yeah, that is my review. Hope it's helped, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.